On the edge of a quiet town in Arlington, Virginia, there was an old military cemetery where thousands of American heroes rested. Every Sunday morning, before the sun had fully risen, an old man named William Carter walked slowly through the endless rows of white marble headstones. William was 82 years old. His gray hair peeked out from beneath an old military cap. His back was slightly bent with age, but every step he took was steady, and every step was filled with respect. In his hands, he carried a fresh bouquet of white lilies.
He never missed a Sunday. Not in the rain, not in the summer heat, not even during the cold winter snow. Every Sunday, William came to the same grave. He carefully cleaned the headstone, placed the flowers, stood straight, and gave a military salute. Then, he would sit quietly beside the grave for nearly an hour. Many people who visited the cemetery noticed him. Some believed the soldier was his son. Others thought he was his grandson. But no one really knew the truth. The name on the grave was Private Daniel Brooks. He had died in 2016, and he was only 23 years old. For years, William continued visiting the grave. Rain or shine, he never stopped. Until one autumn morning, a young journalist named Emma Reynolds arrived at the cemetery. Emma was working on a newspaper series called The People We Forget. She wanted to tell stories about ordinary people whose lives had been touched by sacrifice and courage. As Emma walked through the cemetery, she noticed William. There he was again, kneeling beside Daniel's grave. He gently removed the fallen leaves. Then he placed fresh white lilies beside the headstone. Finally, he stood up and gave a slow military salute. Emma watched quietly. There was something about the moment that touched her heart.
When William finally turned around and began to walk away, Emma gathered the courage to approach him. "Excuse me, sir." William stopped. Emma smiled politely. "I'm Emma. I'm a journalist." William nodded. Then Emma asked, "I've seen you here many times. May I ask you something?" William looked at her. "Of course." Emma pointed gently toward the grave. "Was Private Daniel Brooks your son?" William looked at the headstone. Then he slowly shook his head. "No." Emma was surprised. "Your grandson?" Again, William shook his head. "No." Emma hesitated. "Then your brother?" Looked back at her. "No." Emma didn't know what to say. Finally, she asked, "Then why do you come here every Sunday?" William turned his eyes toward the endless rows of white headstones. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he quietly answered, "Because someone should." Emma didn't understand. William walked over to a nearby bench and slowly sat down. He looked at the empty cemetery. Then he said, "If you have time, I'll tell you a story." Emma sat beside him. She turned off her recorder. Some stories, she believed, should first be heard with the heart. William took a deep breath and began. "Many years ago, I served in the United States Army. After I retired, I began volunteering at a military hospital. That's where I met Daniel." William smiled for the first time. He was only 22 years old. He was young, funny, and full of life. Daniel loved baseball. He loved making people laugh. And he talked about his little sister all the time. He dreamed about taking her to Disney World when he came home. Emma listened carefully.
William continued. Daniel wasn't afraid of dying, but he was afraid of something else. He was afraid that one day, people would forget him. One afternoon, Daniel said something William never forgot. He smiled and said, "If something happens to me, I wonder if anyone will remember my birthday." William laughed when he heard it. He told Daniel, "Don't worry, you'll be home before your birthday." William paused. His smile disappeared. Neither of them knew those would be the last words they would ever share. A few months later, Daniel was deployed overseas. And then, the terrible news arrived. Daniel Brooks had been killed while protecting members of his unit. He was only 23 years old. William attended his funeral. Only 6 people came. Daniel's parents had already passed away. His sister lived overseas and couldn't return in time. When everyone
else left, William stayed behind. He stood alone beside Daniel's grave. He looked at the young soldier's name and remembered their conversation. "I wonder if anyone will remember me." William closed his eyes and made a promise. He whispered, "As long as I'm alive, you will never be forgotten." And from that Sunday forward, William returned. Every single week. He brought fresh flowers. He cleaned the grave. He remembered Daniel's birthday. Every Memorial Day, he placed a small American flag beside the headstone. And every Christmas, he left a handwritten letter. Not because Daniel could read it, but because William had made a promise. Years passed. Seasons changed. Spring became summer. Summer became autumn. And autumn became winter. But William never stopped coming. The cemetery workers began to recognize him. Visitors began asking about Daniel. Children stopped to read the name on the grave. And slowly, something beautiful happened. Daniel Brooks, the soldier who once feared being forgotten, was no longer forgotten.
Emma sat silently beside William. Tears slowly filled her eyes. Now she understood. William didn't visit Daniel because they were family. He visited because someone had once asked, "Will anyone remember me?" And William had decided the answer would always be yes. The following Sunday, something different happened. Emma returned to the cemetery. But this time, she wasn't alone. Dozens of people were standing beside Daniel's grave. Veterans, families, students, children carrying flowers. People who had never met Daniel, but had come to remember him. There were no cameras, no reporters, no big speeches. Just people, standing quietly, paying their respects. William looked around. He saw all those people gathered around Daniel's grave. For the first time in many years, he smiled. He walked slowly toward the headstone, placed a fresh bouquet of white lilies, and stood straight. Then, he gave one final salute. The American flag moved gently in the morning wind. The sun rose above the cemetery, and golden light covered the rows of white marble graves. Daniel Brooks was no longer just a name carved into stone. His story had found its way into the hearts of strangers. And perhaps that was the greatest way to honor a forgotten soldier. Because sometimes a hero doesn't need a statue. He doesn't need a parade. He only needs someone to
to remember his name. William slowly turned around and began walking through the cemetery. Behind him, Daniel's grave stood surrounded by flowers and American flags. And for the first time, William knew he had kept his promise.